right. Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Millennials Are Killing Capitalism Live. So, tonight we have a special episode. I reached out to a bunch of people that are friends of mine, some friends of friends. And, I just earlier this week, or maybe it was Friday, I guess it was whenever, we saw the encampments start to go up. We saw the repression start to happen, and we saw obviously encampments and occupations now proliferating on campuses all across the country. And I thought, certainly we're not in a place where we're going to be trying to give people advice on, this is what you should do, this is how you should do it. Um, but we did want to share information, right? I think one of the things that, the counterinsurgency field manual talks about is one of the key tactics of counterinsurgency is to disrupt the intergenerational transmission of knowledge, right? Is to isolate generations from each other and make them have to deal with all of these lessons on their own every time that a new phase of struggle pops up. And so we have folks here who have been a part of encampments and occupations going back probably 15 years, if not more. And, certainly going back to the Occupy movement. And, we have someone here, Jason, who's been a part of a large encampment at Howard University, an occupation of a building. And so there's a lot of experiences here that, we could share, and thought it would be great to bring them into conversation with one another. Um, so I'm not going to do long introductions of everybody, but I am going to say a couple words about everybody. So Jason Ajake is a political strategist, organizer, and advocate from San Francisco Bay Area. He is currently based in New Jersey. Jason attended Howard in Washington, D.C., where he co-founded a grassroots student organization called HU Resist, which led a 9-day sit-in of their administration building in 2018. There is a previous episode we did all the way back in 2018. I should say Jason was the first, he along with, I think, Alexis McKinney, but they were the first guests of Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. Very first episode, right? So just, that's cool. Wiley Cunningham is a member of Philadelphia Housing Action and took part in a number of encampments during the Occupy protests, was part of Occupy ICE Philly, as well as, the housing protest encampments and takeover of houses during the summer and fall of 2020. Sterling Johnson was also a part of those efforts. Sterling is a lawyer, geographer, and scholar activist. Both of them have been on the podcast before a couple of times. Well, this is Wiley's second time, but and then Khalil is a new Afrikan Muslim from Oakland, focused on building autonomy by raising kids and mentoring young militants in the community now. Khalil was a part of Occupy Oakland / the Oakland Commune. And Wendy Trevino, who's also been on the show a couple of times now, is the author of Cruel Fiction and Brazilian is Not a Race. Her political home is with anarchists and anti-state communists. She was a part of Occupy Oakland and the Oakland Commune as well. So those are our guests. Before I bring them to the stage, just make sure to do the basics and, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with folks, share it with young folks, share it with people that you're taking to encampments with you. Hopefully everybody is getting involved where they can, because wherever you are, unless you're in a very isolated area, there's a likelihood that there's one not too far from you. And so anyways, want to say that. And I'll just say also one last thing, which is I'm just really inspired by the bravery of this generation and the young people who are setting up these encampments, who are, militantly defending their spaces from police. Obviously, they're risking a lot and putting their bodies and, careers and graduation on the line. And I think they know that, and they're taking a principled stand to do that anyway. So just first, before we get into anything, salute to all of the young folks who are doing that. So I'm going to welcome everybody to the stage. All right. Welcome, everybody. So the first question, was I just wanted to give you all time to kind of start with just a short answer here to kind of talk about at a broad level your own experiences with occupations and encampments. And this is a short answer, so in this answer, I mean more just kind of running through them rather than going into the weeds of them, which we can talk about a little bit as we get into it. But Wiley, since you're next to me on my screen, why don't you start?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I guess as far as encampments, protest encampments that I've been involved in, mostly, like you said in the bio, just like Occupy East Philly, Occupy encampments back in, when was that, 2011? I forget now. And then the stuff we did in 2020 here in Philly, where there was a big housing protest encampment and some housing takeovers. I've also like done various like encampment defenses of just like straight homeless encampments. All those protest encampments I was involved in all had like a really high level of participation and even leadership by homeless folks. And I don't know. Yeah, that's my high level.
It's a good start. Wendy, why don't you go next?
So for me, I participated in, there's been several, I think at least a few encampments, but I got into Occupy Oakland very shortly after I started doing things in the streets. So I didn't know a lot about some of the things that were going on. Like I could see that there were groups that had been organizing together for a long time. And I knew the great thing about it was like here, everyone was doing stuff collectively. So I was able to like kind of orient myself better as someone who had only been doing these things for like a few months and had already been part of like building occupations at UC Berkeley. And the first thing I did was anti-police, like an anti-police march or whatever. But it was a really interesting experience in the way that I was able to like immediately see these differences between various people that were around. And I could tell, some people had known each other a long time, were on the same page. And I was able to learn a lot about what it meant to be a radical and a militant in that environment. But that's, basically my experience that was the majority, or that's the big experience for me. And then eventually there was also like, we went to Occupy San Francisco as well. There was a lot of moving around in those days, and like back to Berkeley, back to San Francisco, back to Oakland, that kind of thing. And then there was an Occupy ICE encampment in San Francisco in 2018 as well. So yeah, that's my experience with these things.
Right on. Yeah, Sterling, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, been with Wiley through the Parkway encampment. For myself, there were a few. It really started with doing outreaches in Kensington with ACT UP Philadelphia, and this other group called Soul Collective, which is still in existence, but that came out of that organizing of ACT UP Philadelphia, which was just making sure that people had enough, safer use supplies, syringes, pipes, all the stuff that goes to, using safely. And over that time, there was, successive waves of evictions that were posted, and then we'd come out and try to defend or observe and work with, kind of understand the governance of how like a homeless encampment kind of happens. So I feel like we've done that through 4 years. I guess that's where I'm at. And then also it was used as a strategy when we were doing some tenant organizing as well, just as a way to take up space and also to be a place where people stopped in and they were talking about their own thing. That was at the UC Townhome, which I talked extensively about 2 years ago. So that's what I got.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
For sure. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. I'm so happy to be here speaking, on this panel with you all. I love learning about the Occupy movement because I was a little bit too young to be involved in that one, but I feel like it was kind of like the prelude to BLM in a lot of ways. So I just wanted to say that. In terms of my involvement with these types of things, I kind of categorize encampments, occupations, sit-ins, we shall not be moved, shut it down, all really in the same category of, the status quo is not working and something has to be done about it, right? And so my first involvement with this type of action was in 2016 in Oakland, California, specifically around the summertime, I believe. Philando Castile had recently been murdered by the police. Excuse me, I forget in which city, but I know that also the Oakland Police Department had been involved in some type of sexual misconduct scandal. And basically, we took over the freeway for the whole night. And, that was like my first big action, risk taking, spending a prolonged amount of time doing something like that. Secondly, would be probably the following year, I had taken an internship with SEIU. So we had a city council hearing, and members came together, unions came together pretty much to shut down the city council hearing. Again, I forget what we were doing it for, probably a budget reason, probably having to do with funding, wages, et cetera, and so forth. But yeah, we shut down the city council hearing and they had to reschedule it. Again, as a young person, this was empowering to me and it kind of showed me the power of the people and how the powers that be, you know what I'm saying, they have their structures and their institutions, but sometimes creatively we can kind of, work around them and undermine and circumvent, you know what I mean? And then thirdly, the most recent type of involvement with this type of thing would have been obviously when I was in college. I think Jared mentioned HE Resist. We had a sit-in 9 days of our administration building related to a number of issues: housing, just general human rights, student rights, wanting to be more progressive and involved in the community. And hopefully we'll have some more time to talk about it tonight.
For sure. Yeah, Khalil, please. Oh, his looks like he might be frozen. All right. Khalil, can you hear me? Let's see. Try again. Yeah, sorry. Just
I can hear
could you
now, but it's
introduce yourself?
silent for like 10 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you just introduce yourself real quick?
So,
Yeah.
Yep. I'm Khalil Abu Zaid. My experience with encampments has mainly been Occupy Oakland. I lived in the camp for the first 10 days continuously and was like very involved there. Was the longest 10 days of my life, and a lot happened. Every single day was like a couple of years of organizing other places for me. And then, I've had some involvement just with helping with a little bit of encampment defense with my neighbors who are, living in an encampment or lived in an encampment until it was evicted. Although that's like, a little more low key. So yeah, that's me. I'm from Oakland. My main involvement in the camp was I helped a lot. There was kind of a big disconnect between, I always like to say there were like two different worlds at Occupy Oakland. There was like the daytime and the General Assembly and all that type of stuff, and the people who weren't staying in the camp. And then the people who were staying in the camp or were like deeply involved with people staying in the camp. And that was a totally other world, and I learned a lot from that experience.
I appreciate that, and I imagine that's a theme that other folks will echo in some their work with encampments and occupations and so on. All right. So the second question that I have is just to take a little bit longer now, and take 5 to 10 minutes each and walk through some of the important elements of. You can pick one, if you want to, or of just some of the important elements of your experience with encampments, um, and yeah, whatever you kind of want to share with that. So yeah, we can go in the same order. So Wiley, if you want to go. You're muted.
Okay, sorry. Hey, yeah, I guess I'll just talk about the encampments we did in 2020. Talk about that a little bit more, and Sterling can probably add on to it. He spent a lot more time in granular detail at the camp. But yeah, that camp kicked off in June of 2020, like shortly after the uprising. We had already been kind of doing this housing takeover campaign where we were occupying vacant units of public housing for a few months. We'd moved in about 10 families into vacant buildings and got them, working and safe and habitable. We kind of started doing that coming out of an encampment defense where the city cleared this encampment at the convention center the day that the CDC issued a guidance to cities not to do that. And they went and did it anyways. We confronted homeless services, tried to intervene, but they went and carried it out anyways. And then our comrade who passed away a couple years ago now, Jen Benich, was just like, to hell with this. We're gonna go open a house right now, And we started moving folks in. Then after the uprising, the National Guard got called in. That was a whole other situation and pretty lively here in Philly. But one of the outcomes of that was the homeless population downtown was displaced by the National Guard, and some other comrades that were helping us do the takeovers decided that it was time. They made a move and opened up this protest encampment that grew really rapidly. It's I think the first day there was just 5 people there. By that night there was 20. By the next day there was over 50, and the next day it was over 100. I think it probably peaked at around 200, dwindled back down to 150 to the 130. Kind of was more the stable kind of size of it. Our homie Jen opened up another front and brought some people up to an encampment across from the housing authority that was about 30 people. And we were out there for a little over 5 months. I don't think we wrapped up until October. We went through several threats of eviction and cops coming out, and they brought preachers one time, and they made all kinds of statements in the press about us, said that we were being unreasonable, mobilized all these other public sector homeless service nonprofits and stuff to talk shit on us and that kind of stuff. All kinds of other provocation stuff on the ground level. But for the most part, we were able to harness a lot of energy from the uprising. A lot of folks found that to be the space where they could actually meet with other people and form relationships and organize. And that sort of just became the movement locus for that summer. And the encampment stayed a police-free zone. They didn't really come in there the whole time. Bad stuff happened. We survived it and kept it moving. Anytime they would attack us, we just kind of flip it on them and keep it moving. So yeah, I don't know. That's I guess the overview, but I don't know.
Sterling, I mean,
yeah,
you guys can jump in.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of want to hear about other people's stuff and maybe go back and forth to hear responses. But it's I don't know. We all have different perspectives, but I don't know. I never know what to say. But I don't come from the Occupy movement. I was in law school in 2011. I was in San Francisco at Hastings trying to, I don't know what I was doing. I'm just trying to be real about this. It's that radicalization or whatever that happened, happened because I attempted to, me as kind of this Black queer disabled person that has been in mental health and recovery spaces. I just had seen how it's so how it wasn't working. So at least for me, I kind of had built so many relationships with people that I called in almost every favor that I at least politically that I could I could do, and just demanded that they like write a letter, support us, talk to this person. That, you know, we knew somebody at the Inquirer that I used to work with, and he like would he wrote an editorial, said like, no, give these people housing. Knew this other person. You know, I just knew a lot of people in the city that could give us cover. You know, from you know, Mike Hinson, who is a elder here that passed away last year or two. And you know, and also it's like we weren't alone, so there were a lot of people that had, you know, just, you know, in the movement, you know, the movement for Mumia people, you know, with like, you know, to like Free Ant, you know, Ant Smith, who, you know, is in federal prison right now, you know, and Gabe Bryant, you know, the Yane, you know, people showed up for in a real way and supported it. And so when there were calls for evictions, there's a lot of, you know, hundreds of people would show up, and the police, you know, I think they could have beat us, but I would say it wouldn't have been easy, especially with some of the people in the encampment, who, at least my experience with organizing with people that are homeless, experiencing homelessness, that they're just not afraid. They're not afraid people, and so I guess that's who I kind of fuck with. Yeah, can we curse on this? Do we curse? Does it matter?
It's fine. Yes,
okay,
you can
great.
curse.
Yeah, and then I mean, there's all sorts of things, right? And I don't know. I felt like, yeah, I saw some of my man Khalil on the street, and I was just reminded of like when we went in to the first time, you know, probably like, I forget how long, but we were probably there for like 4 weeks, and then they called. No, it's July 26th. Yeah. I forget, but there was a certain amount of time where they wanted to meet us, and you know, I'm like, great. I'm like, okay, great. We're gonna get to some space. You know, we're almost there, and I'm like preparing things. I'm like getting ready, and you know, some of the people that we're with, they're just like, this isn't anything, and they just walk out. They just like walk out in the middle. They just like, nah, I'm good. And it's like, and you know, of course, everybody should have followed them out, but like that, I don't know. I feel like I taught like Khalil and some of the other people, like they kind of teach you this, like this is it's nonsense. When they invite you to a meeting, it's like, it's either you waste their time or you're wasting their time, but like, don't treat it seriously. You're the one that got the leverage, you know. So even sometimes, I mean, you know, this is a questionable move on my part, but one time I just like did a 50-minute presentation that was like meant to like embarrass them, like, and talk about how like you make that more money than you, and why are you making more money than him, but like, why isn't that money going to people anyway? You know, I don't know. So I just wasted people's time to treat it like a game. You know, I think that kind of came out and to other people because they kind of thought that we weren't taking it seriously. But to tell you the truth, I wasn't taking it seriously. I thought it was like the meetings that you have where you're dealing the thing. It's like, that's not where it's going to happen. You know, where it happened was the fact that our friend Jen was on some very valuable property, and the and they were about to lose a lot of money. So they called her late at night to make a deal and said, I'll give this to you, and then you sign this. And I was like, before, I didn't even know about it. It was just like, it just happened, right? So there are things like that, and you know, there was a lot of things where it's like, oh, what happened? And there was like, you know, there are the things that were happening where you're breaking trust, but you're coming together, you're coming back, you're trying to explain this to 100 other people as well. When we're talking about the larger encampment, you know, when we got an offer of a deal, it was like Jen and I went down and we just talked to everybody, and it took hours. It took hours on hours. I remember my feet hurt so much, and it was also so cold. I will say the July and the August, that was fine, but like when it started to get cold, like I remember how, I guess start an encampment in April. This is encampment season in Philly. Then you can go to the 5 months, but when it starts to get like October, you know, it starts to get a little cold at night. But you know, just be ready for that. Also, just be ready for all this stuff. Is, you know, what I say, because I mean, I think somebody mentioned things got different at night. You know, I couldn't stay there. I don't know. As a disabled person, I tried to go as hard as I could. But yeah, I will say it got, and I think it was Khalil mentioned that it got, when you're staying there, it's a whole different vibe at night, and it was a whole different vibe at night, and it did I don't know. I feel like I learned a lot from people and about that, but you know, I just want to share a little bit of that, you know, but about how it actually went down, because I will say it wasn't, I don't know, it's not straightforward. It's sometimes it can be a little messy, but you know, I think we're still got trust with some people, still trying to build trust with other people on it, you know, but I feel like we're in a good place right now.
So I just want to clarify a little bit before we move on, and just say to folks who don't know too much about the history of the struggle that you two are talking about, like, this was a 5-month, 6-month encampment, and that at the end of it, the deal you all are talking about was to get, I think, 50 homes, like a certain number from the city and a certain number from um, PHA, which is Philadelphia Housing Authority, right? And so this was lauded, and they're in a land trust, right? And so this was, a big deal at the time in 2020. I think it was the biggest thing like this that happened, among similar types of actions that did happen around the country. And so I know, even though, as you all are saying, there were contradictions, there were people upset that thought you should have got more, or didn't feel like um, it was democratic process or things like that around some of the stuff. Like, nonetheless, I think it's important to recognize that oftentimes you don't get those kind of material wins out of encampments and occupations too, and so it's significant for sure. So what we'll do, so Khalil and Wendy, if you want to do something similar, where you kind of can talk about your own experiences with Occupy, and you can take turns or whatever, and then we'll let Jason kind of have the last word on this section, if that makes sense. So
Khalil, you want to start?
I think Khalil's having some issues with the internet.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Khalil? Okay, I'll start. So for me, okay,
Sure.
yes, go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Am I clear for everybody? Sorry. It would be hard to sum it all up in an event, but I think that it was the biggest thing for me was the dichotomy that emerged between the night, because we had a principle, and I think this makes it different from a lot of other encampments, and so it might apply to, especially what you were saying, a lot of young people are doing now, it might apply to their situation, it might not at all, because a lot of what we wanted was, we had this principle that the demand was the camp. Like, we weren't trying to get something.
That's too bad. Go ahead, Wendy. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start. Well, what he said is true. That the principle, the demand was the camp itself, and that was very different than even what we see going on right now, and definitely than what was happening in Philly that you guys were talking about. For me, like I said, I was very new, and what I saw, or what I ended up experiencing, was almost like a crash course in organizing, in like all the things that can go wrong and go right in movements, and it just felt like what Khalil said, where every day felt like a very long time. It just felt like years were, and I remember talking to other people about like the way it affected my sense of time. Like, it just felt like so much was happening, and I was living like, years in like a week, And that was an incredible feeling. But one of the things that like I think is really powerful about this is the way that it can bring a lot of elements together. This is also one of the drawbacks about it, because you're gonna have all the problems that you have outside, you're gonna have inside as well. But now it's so concentrated, and the existence of the camp is resistance itself. So it just changes the dynamics. And I will say that, like, I think Oscar Grant, organizing around Oscar Grant, was crucial to what happened in Oakland that year. Absolutely. And I could tell that there were a lot of the people that at the time I didn't know them, but that I admired and was meeting, they had been organizing around Oscar Grant, the Oscar Grant riots and the Oscar Grant movement prior to this. And when they put, like, I'll never forget, like, my ex had actually been arrested at a building occupation at Berkeley not that long, and we are not students, but we were helping there. And it was pretty bad, the arrest. He was hogtied and beaten really badly. But like people like that were there, we ended up seeing them later passing around flyers for the Occupy Oakland encampment. And when they saw us, they immediately like smiled, and they were like, come, like, come to this thing. And also the big thing was like, we're going to like, it's going to be Oakland specific. It's going to like be coming out of the context of Oakland, which is also to say Oscar Grant. And eventually, like, when we got into the plaza, we renamed it Oscar Grant Plaza, and I think that those kinds of moves, those like kind of establishing a culture for the encampment, really like stuck with me, because it, kind of set the tone. And immediately, even at that point, like, there were arguments within the people that were like going to be part of the encampment. I don't know what that is. Sorry. But people within the encampment were arguing about whether or not, it's okay to like rename the plaza, so all those arguments that you would be seeing outside, we were having them inside too, but like there was definitely, because there had been organizing for Oscar Grant and related to that around anti-police work, you had like groups of people that knew each other, that had, like had relationships and had like points of unity already, prior to entering this camp. So even like prior to entering the camp, there had already been established like no police, which I think distinguished Occupy Oakland from a lot of other places. And for me, as someone that was very new to this, I just kept my eyes on, like, I was of course getting to know some of these people, but like I kept my eyes on those people and was like, how do I like help? Like, where I don't need to be like with them, like they all know each other. Cause some people were very put off by like, they were like cliquishness or whatever. I didn't see it that way at all. Like, I saw people who had put their bodies on the line for a long time, and who had a lot to lose by just like opening the door to anyone, like I got that and I appreciated them. And I'm saying this because I think some people might, be in these situations where like you see these people that have been working together, like just try to figure out how to help, like it's great to have people with lots of experience in these situations, and it's great to learn from them. And here you get to learn from all of them together, whereas like once that camp is broken up, or like part of the power of the camp is that you can just go to one place and they're all there, and you're like having the arguments, you're with them. It's also like the organizing didn't just stop at the camp. Like out of the camp came things like the queer femme group. There was like queer femme organizing, like, basically autonomous organizing. Also, like there was a group of young Black men that were organizing like actions, weekly for a while there. Like there's a lot of other kinds of organizing, like smaller groups that can happen within the camp, which I think is really powerful and honestly necessary, because like I said, all the problems that existed outside the camp continued inside the camp. And so you need to like be basically working with each other, but like in smaller groups too, to address those issues, and I found that to be a really powerful thing. But like the number one thing that I think I gained from that was like an orientation towards radical politics, because there were people that were actually practicing those radical politics on a daily basis. And there were constantly arguments about them. And so I was constantly aligning myself with certain groups as opposed to others. And that really, like I said, it was like a crash course in, like, you know, what are bad liberal anti-oppression politics? What are good liberal, not liberal, but what are good like anti-oppression politics? Like, what is the difference there? You know, what is radical? Like, you know, what is militancy? All those things. I feel like I was able to learn so much in a very short amount of time because of that that tactic of the occupation or the encampment. Khalil, can you hear? Can you hear now? And can you talk?
Yeah, Khalil,
Yeah,
if
it's
you
much
want to
better
add
now.
on,
Okay, good.
go ahead.
Yeah, so I was thinking, I think that there was a lot, man, to draw from that time, but you know, if I had to think of like maybe like two incidents real quick that like summed up a lot of what were my takeaways, it was um again our like main demand, I think Wendy might touch on this a little bit, but was like it was the camp itself. So it's a little different from other encampments because it wasn't necessarily leveraging for something. We like wanted the camp itself like was the objective, you know what I mean? Um and you know, so it's like it was a big lesson in how much we could do with like very little infrastructure. Um, so I guess two of the biggest lessons would be I learned like, and that I would take away from it was like you have to. It's not really. It's not all about what you do in the encampment. A lot of it is about what did you build and what were you doing in the prior 5 to 10 years. You know, like because when we ran up against the limits of what we could do with that camp, it was limits that had to do with how strong was the infrastructure, how much infrastructure were we able to implement, how many services were we able to provide. And we did provide a lot, but it was like there's an objective limit that like you can't just freestyle on the spot, improvise, you know, an entirely new communal infrastructure. Um, and you know, like an example of a big success with that, but there was something, you know, a lot of people overlooked, but to me was like a high point of the whole thing was like early on, you know, like every day was like a whole odyssey and could like be talked about for hours. But like on the second or third day, we had started to have, or maybe it was later than that, within the first week, you know, we had started with a lot of issues with fights in the night. People would go get drunk or they would be drinking in the camp and then be fighting. Um, and then so there was an issue. So we made a rule that we're like in the camp, there's no drinking in the camp. Like you could go drink somewhere else or whatever, but no alcohol in the camp. If you smoke weed, do that, but don't do that. And then soon after that, we had a second crisis, which was then there was some cats who came through that some of us knew, and they were trying to sell weed there, you know, and these guys were known to be active, um, you know, in the underground economy, so to speak. So we were like, that's going to be a problem soon enough. If it's not now, it's going to be a problem eventually. So the simple fix we just came up with was it wasn't me, it was another brother who I was with who was just like talk to all the mostly and another thing about the demographics of the camp. So there was a lot of homeless people that already hung out around there. Um, all black, pretty much, mostly black men. And so when the camp came and they were giving out free tents, those people just became an integral part of the camp and were doing a lot of the work. And that was who we were with most of the time. Um, and so we just went around to everybody, mostly all the black men, basically, and we spread the word to everybody that was smoking or anyone we knew who had weed, and we're just like, share your weed. Everybody just like share whatever you got. Like make it so that it's totally free, so there's no need to buy from these dudes, rather than us confronting them or something. And it actually worked, and they left soon after on like good terms. Um, and another situation was that um, you know, around that same time when that whole weed situation was going, something I didn't know was I was walking through the middle of the camp, and there was this brother just standing there in a hoodie. And when I walked past him, he was like, "Assalamu alaikum," like kind of to the air, you know. So I turned around. I wasn't wearing a kufi or anything indicating I was Muslim, but I turned around. I was like, "Wa alaikum salam. You talking to me?" And he was like, "Yeah, man. Like you had a Muslim vibe about you." So I just was like, "Salams." So I was like, "Oh, cool." So I immediately stopped. We start talking. We start finding out about people we know in common and stuff. You know. And so after that, I'm trying to really make this fast, but that became a big thing. There were a lot of pre-existing relationships among Muslims, mostly Black Muslims, in the community that existed that then became really integral to us being able to literally survive after that. And he later told me, he said, actually, I was standing around because I was there to rob everybody that night. Like I had something on me. I was going to just go through everybody's pockets and just take everybody's weed because there was like so much weed there. And when I saw you and then we got to talking, I was like, let me hang out for a minute. And that brother became like an integral part of the organizing in the camp and for like years afterward. And the last scenario I get to give the contrast, I'm trying to wrap this up, is my comrade at the time who is a non-Muslim woman, Noura. At that time, she had this experience where she was running around all day looking for. There was this collective. Again, there was all what was going on in the camp, but then there were these collectives in the GA and all this activist stuff that was happening. And there was a Safer Spaces collective dedicated to trying to make the space safer. But it was all people who didn't live in the camp, right? Mostly predominantly white and like people of color, academics and stuff like that, who were a little bit out of touch with what was going on. Um, and she spent like all day looking for them because there were all these emergency situations I was telling her about. And I was like, I don't have time to go find these people and find where their meeting is at. But if they have resources, find these people and tell them we need help. Okay. Like we need some expertise because we can't just be like doing what we're doing every night. This is like later. Anyway, so eventually she finds these people. She's like in a very near manic state by that point because there's so many different crises going on. And she interrupts their meeting to be like, hey, we have like this and this mental health crisis going on. Like the security team that Khalil and these other brothers are on has been like dealing with it, but it's not a security situation. It's like a mental health situation. How can y'all help us? And they were like, you can't like just jump stack and just like interrupt the meeting. And this is like you have to like respect our process and all this stuff. And then while this is happening, then all of a sudden they see this black man with dreads dragging another dude out of a tent, hitting him. And they were like shaking their heads at that. And they were like, see, that's like the effed up, like patriarchal macho violence they like need to address in this space. And then they continued to have like this hours long conversation about it. Didn't do nothing, by the way. And so later she comes and tells me, and I'm like, dude, the dude who was pulling that dude out of the tent, there was a rape going on in the tent during their meeting, in earshot of them. And the dude who they were shaking their head at, like, look at this effed up patriarchal black male or whatever, dragging the dude out the tent, was stopping it. Right. But they're over there like having this long meeting. And so for that to me, like kind of encapsulated the two kind of worlds and what we learned about them. So the two lessons were kind of I think you gotta like check your theory at the door, and try to be more in touch, not let like theory and long meetings take stuff over. And everything is going to depend on like, what were you doing for the last 5 to 10 years? And what are you going to do after in between the encampments? Hope that was coherent.
Yeah, it was. I appreciate it. And I'm sure that, Wiley and Sterling could share similar, stories from their experiences as well. Jason, so yours is different, I mean, especially talking about Howard, because it's one of the reasons I really wanted to have you here is because obviously you have this experience on a college campus, dealing with a campus administration, um, you know, uh, negotiating, thinking about timelines of end of school year, all that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot, I think, from your experience that is different than organizing an encampment, which a lot of the ones you all are talking about, there's a big contingent of homeless folks within them, and like that's a part of what you negotiate, what you're also working for. In the case of Philadelphia Housing Action, your encampment was also about housing specifically, um but yeah, so Jason, talk about your experience at Howard.
Yeah, for sure. So, I don't really know exactly where to start, where to end. I know you mentioned that we had one episode, but I think we actually had two episodes back in the day. So, some of the in between, people can kind of go back and hear the more details. But,
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, the first one was on disruption of James Coney coming to Howard, and then the second one was specific to the occupation. Yeah.
Yep. But sometimes when I think about my involvement in that type of stuff at that time, I ask myself, why was I doing all of that? And not in a way of regret, but there are on a college campus, right? There's so many things you can be doing. You could be going out having fun. You could be a star in class. You could be this. You could be a sports. You know what I'm saying? Why building collective power with students, which takes so many hours and time and energy and a lot of relationships that are lost? I think that really it comes down to you know what I'm saying, like wanting to do something to make a difference for the future, and then also just being called in the moment, right? And I think a lot of this work is grounded in like care and the heart. And hearing about these homeless encampments is really fascinating to me, because growing up in California, seeing homelessness is all over, right? And so it's one of those things that has never made sense. And I bring that up to say that our occupation, it was a 3.5 year, I would say 3.5 year buildup to that occupation, right? And so the details of the occupation I'll get to as soon as possible. But we really started off wanting to build a deeper connection and relationship between the university and the community, because we felt like, how are we going to be Black people over here acting so bougie? We're in Chocolate City, around the culture, the people, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then we were told all the time never to interact with the locals, this, that, and the third. We defied that type of energy, right? And so we recognized that there was an interest in us kind of being molded into certain types of people, and we rejected that. And so that's really what grounded, our movement. But catching up to the occupation, yes, we had a 9-day occupation. The numbers, the 300, I think is a lower estimate, because we had people going back and forth taking shifts. I think that the actual count of like total people involved was closer to 900. Um, but we had a list of demands, and we had prior experience already negotiating with our administration. It wasn't our first set of demands. We had demands 2 years prior, and those ones we worked around, but we also noticed some limitations. We refined them. We had talked with the administration. We tried to do what we could do, and then over time, the demands, some of them became a little bit less relevant, right? So we kind of redeveloped them. But in redeveloping them, we already had the experience of the first go. And so we kind of knew how to get folks engaged. So it was a whole campaign. You know what I mean? We did a survey of the student body. We said that we needed like 5% of the student population to be on board before we even committed to doing anything. We had, people who were in sociology, people who were in data, they were running the analytics, providing graphs. I wish I had the documents to share, but there's all online somewhere. And I say that because this was like a full-fledged type of activity that really can't be described as just a 9-day moment in time, because there was so much buildup for it, and it just so happened that the situation kind of arose from other situations that kind of triggered this situation to, you know what I mean? And so some of those situations would be housing. We had a gentrification committee because in DC, everyone knows the rent is too damn high. And it was not only high for us, as students, it's high for the community. And it's something that affects everybody. Where people live, where you sleep, it's very sensitive. You know what I mean? It's kind of critical to the overall like hierarchy of needs. And so a lot of students didn't have housing. For monetary reasons, the university would accept way more students than they could provide housing for. People 17, 18 years old would have to find housing in Washington, D.C.'s rental market. Very difficult. We had people that didn't have anywhere to go. We had people that had to leave. It wasn't really equitable. So housing was a major concern. And so the idea of an occupation of we're going to bring our beds to the administration building, it was rather convenient, you know what I'm saying? Because it kind of played on that narrative, that theme of where are we going to sleep? Additionally, we had a 2-year campaign to build what we called the People's Pantry, which was a food distribution to the homeless community surrounding our campus. And all we really wanted was our administration to fund us. We felt like we were doing something that they should be proud of, something that they would want to be a part of. And they didn't want anything to do with us. And it was frustrating because it's like, why are we here with all these resources if we can't even do that? And so, all of our demands were a mix of student concerns and also community concerns. And so we, I think, successfully really fused the elements of being grounded in community while also addressing the needs and interests of the student body, which was critical in getting critical mass support, because at the end of the day, it was the students that was occupying the building, right? And so, like I think Khalil mentioned, or maybe, yeah, I think Khalil, or maybe Sterling, every day was like a whirlwind. Um, for us, we didn't going into it have an end game. We weren't sure how long we were going to stay in the administration building. But after 9 days, we kind of collectively arrived at the decision that strategically we reached a point of kind of like our momentum was dwindling. And so we felt that it was important to make a decision before it was too late and before too much, there were too many consequences. I say that because obviously, you know, we have people that are taking major risks that are being arrested, you know, and I definitely respect that. But for us, we definitely were trying to stay out of jail for the most part. And we knew that there were police, you know, helicopters. We knew that there were other involvement with the powers that be. And we were students going up with what against felt like the world. And so I would say for us, something that was really important was having collective processes. Something like self-governance was really important, figuring out what that looks like. Um, Having committees, different groups of people that are responsible for different things. You know, otherwise it's easy for things to kind of get out of hand, and it's easy for certain people too to try to, you know, co-opt. I think that's another question that's going to be coming up in this conversation. Um, and so, yeah, it was a little bit different than what everyone else has talked about, but also similar in the sense that we were really coming from a place of the heart, coming from a place of care and solidarity for not only ourselves, but our fellow humans. Um, and yeah, I think that's what I want to say for right now.
Right on, and we'll get to more of it later. I'm gonna take a quick break to show one little thing. So I just wanted to share that real quick. That was one of my favorite viral moments from the Occupation, and then of course Rihanna retweeted it too, which was
Oh,
funny.
that was the best. We just felt so Rihanna. Oh my God.
Right on. Yeah, so we'll get more into that because there's more to talk about. I think, you know, as we get into your demands and like how that process went and the aftermath and all of that. So let's move to the next question. I wanted to talk about leverage in this discussion, right? And so each of you, you know, take a few minutes and just talk about where you think the leverage is or was in your encampments, and what are some things for people to consider in terms of maximizing the leverage of encampments as a tactic? Yeah, Wiley and Sterling, if you want to start.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess all the encampments I've been a part of, like the encampment itself was a point of leverage. It was, as a tactic, you're kind of like up in their face. You're not like camping out somewhere out of the way where no one can see you. You're up in a public place, like right in the way. And you're making the problem that you're trying to talk about very visible to everybody and throwing it in their face and kind of like getting on the news. And like the news loves something like that because there's something every day you can go and report on. It's like an ongoing story, you know. So if you're out there for very long, you just get media attention on an ongoing basis or whatever without having to try too hard and write a bunch of press releases or whatever. So the encampment, like staying there and surviving and being defended, is definitely like a point of leverage, and is really important. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's obviously a lot of like just basic logistical concerns, like where are people going to go to the bathroom and how are you getting food and water down there and that kind of stuff that a lot of people probably have never really thought about, but it's they're kind of like really important issues that need addressed. That kind of stuff, all kinds of stuff like within an encampment that needs a lot of labor and a lot of work every day. And that's like useful in a lot of ways for getting people involved and feeling some ownership in the thing. But I guess I would say also like I think in my experience, I'm interested to hear like what other people say, but it's also important not to get too inward focused on the encampment. Like I heard folks talking a bit about like, yeah, there was like other crews like doing actions outside of the encampment. And I think that's, I guess what I would say is just like, it's important to go on the offensive and not just sit. And like when the encampment starts to like drag or like not be an issue, or like the police are just waiting you out and waiting for you all to start fighting with each other and tearing each other apart. Because I'll tell you, like when the cops are coming to break up the encampment, everybody has each other's back and there's a lot of solidarity. And then when there's a break from that for a while, all this other kind of shit starts to come up, you know. So I guess I would say like when you're in those moments where there seems like a doldrum, or like the people that you're trying to be up, the people you're up against have decided to like wait you out a little bit, or give you a little space. Don't just sit. Take the offensive. You know, figure out and remember who your targets are and how to get at them. Where do they live? What are their business relationships? What do they care about? Where is the award ceremony that they're going to? And go there, and don't just sit at the camp, you know, and invite other people to do the same. And I think that's where you get a lot of the kind of like autonomous action space, and opens up a lot of like creative freedom for people who support what you're doing, but maybe can't be at the encampment every day, to plan a thing with people they know and go and do a thing that adds to what you're doing and supports the demands. And I guess that's what I would say about leverage.
Yeah. I mean, don't leave. I don't know. Sometimes you see people leave, or like they go, and it's like, no, don't do that. I don't know what people think is going to happen after you leave. After you leave, they got you to move, so they're not going to do anything. That's just how it works. And like I like and we would like inch more, and we like take over the street more. And then I don't know, it was mainly the people that were with, and then we're just like figuring out. At least I feel like I was figuring out, okay, so we got the whole street, and now the bus routes have to be moved indefinitely. It's like, okay, well, that's what we're doing. Okay, yeah, we need have more tents over there across the street. Yeah, no, just keep going, you know? Okay, I guess it's like, would you, if you're at the space that where like, it seems like you're just encroaching more and more, and they're just like, we thought that you were going to go away. We're like, well, if you don't stop us, we're going to just have like, we're just going to be everywhere then. There's like another encampment that is going to be opened over here, another encampment in North Philly, you know? So, and I mean, I feel like Jen is the one that kind of like gives that perspective, but around just like, yeah, all the problems that are in the city, like are at the encampment, but like, we're not gonna kind of play that down. That just is the truth, you know? And the way that they can be alleviated is if you give us what we want. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, there's a little bit of a thing around like care too. I think like the leverage of like seeing of like these I don't know, we had powerful images of like people in houses, the people that are in the houses, which are like some of the coolest people that we know, like took care of it. And then there would be like an image that was like, oh wait, so this person is taking care of this place more than the state. Or like somebody like was pressured into a shelter and they died of COVID, while we have COVID tests out here and nobody is dying, you know? Or like people are dying of overdoses across our city, but we got naloxone, and like people are like saving each other, doing that stuff, right? It's like we had like all the support from, you know, the harm reduction orgs like Project Safe and like, you know, there's stuff like that. And I will say, and even when it comes to like some of the safety stuff, I feel like maybe we'll go more into that. I think that we should talk about that, but especially at the encampment. But yeah, that part of it was people did move to another part of the city. The north did, like, I feel like all the feminine trans people just went up north and they were like, we're getting out of here. Yeah, fuck this. We're not dealing with this shit anymore. So like that was like a thing that happened, and like part of it was. And then, like, I think that did help was finding like a good, making sure everyone had beer, cigarettes, and also the right K2 guy. That really helped when it comes down to like what kept things good like just in general, just like things pretty calm, because you do need like resources and I mean, I feel like all of that was leverage. All of that was leverage, and that's just what it is. And also, you would call these people liars. I would call these people liars, and I would say, did they give that to us? Okay, let's see that. Let's see that service that they gave to us. And why does that person just get kicked out of that thing immediately, and now they're back here? And I would just say like, yeah, you're these reporters would say this thing, and I would just honestly, if I saw them this is a little bit crazy, but if I saw them anywhere, I would just like get on a bike or get my Uber, and I would just go chase them down. I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna let you just say that. I would say, I don't know. I just did that. I would say, I mean, you talk to a lot of people. I'm not a nice person like that. No, I would say like, no, you better not say that. That's a lie. Yeah, I'm not gonna let you come here and say that. You better be, you better watch out, because that's, so because the press was real nasty, especially up front. But like, I'm not gonna let them lie on us and just say that things are happening that aren't, and I tell them in the meeting too. It's like, we just spend the meeting with me yelling at them, like, how dare you do this? How dare you do this? Or how dare you say that person is lying about that thing that happened to them? How dare you? So there's a lot of leverage in the moral part of it, and like being very strict and very like direct about like what we're doing. I don't know. I mean, it's who you have in the room too, though. I don't know. I'm a person here that I don't know. I'm a little, and this is a thing too that happened. I feel like there was a lot of misogyny. There is a lot of like homophobia, transphobia. There's all the stuff, but like I'm a queer person, so also, I don't know, just a little bit of. I just had to say, I just remember one time somebody was like kind of like they're kind of being shamed for sex work or shamed for. I'm just like, and I was like, nah. I mean, I take a dick up the ass too. Like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? You just say that to people. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was there. I was doing that last night. What are you doing? And you just gotta, especially when you're down there. It's like, what the fuck are you? What are we doing? We're on this thing. We're in this together. Stop that. Stop that nonsense. This is like, it's like this. I don't know. It's not even to be like that, but this is like revolutionary stuff where it's like, are we together? Are we doing this together or not? Like, leave that shit at home. What are you talking about? Calling people whore or something like that, Nah. It's like, these are our comrades. These are the person that's going to be beside you. Has been here for 5 months with us. So shut the fuck up. I'm just, I don't know. Some of that stuff, I feel like kind of, at least for me, like was a culture driver, at least to let people know, and just everybody know what we are doing, Yeah. I think that helps.
I appreciate that. And I think I've been impressed by a lot of the student encampments at this round of like, quickly coming to the conclusion and putting out statements and saying like, we're students and non-students, right? Like, let's get rid of these dichotomies and these ways of like separating out, so-called outsiders that might come into the encampment from the actual student body and things like that. Those are all, ways that, the press and the administration, et cetera, tries to break these things up and divide people. And I think the comment you made too, Sterling, about the press, like, yeah, I mean, I've never seen the level of demonization that I can think of. I mean, we've seen some stuff. I mean, maybe Ferguson in the early days when it was like, these are mobs and thugs and gangs that are descending upon the city, and that kind of language was being used, but like, I mean, you literally had, the clown from the ADL go on like MSNBC and say these students have been trained by Hamas and Hezbollah, and that, like, this is a mass like Islamic terror front or whatever, and it's like, I mean, about kids at freaking Columbia and and Harvard. Like, I mean, it couldn't be more ridiculous in terms of the propaganda. And yet, like, this is what they're going with right now. Like, this is what the media is like running on. They don't know, they don't have solutions to how to actually demonize this. So they're just going like as ridiculous as possible. And I think, I just brought that up because that comment about you, confronting these people, right? And getting very like antagonistic with them and vocal about the misrepresentations and the narratives, I think is important. But also doing so in a way that's not like uh, you know, dividing, not the sort of like, oh no, we're all peaceful or we're all like, that those kind of things. Just being very honest and confronting people when they're straight up lying about you too, which is another thing that's going on. But yeah, Wendy and Khalil, yeah, the question was about leverage. Sorry. Yeah, so
Khalil, you want to start?
Okay. I think that leverage for us, I mean, I think it has to do with two main things. One is, I basically been mentioned already, so I won't take too long, but real estate. I mean, it's where you at. If you occupy the right spot, then your leverage is that they can't ignore you, right? Um, and the second one that somebody kind of started to touch on, but I would expand on a little bit, I think is that people think that, right, then the leverage is kept by just maintaining it, but leverage is actually kept by expanding it. So it's like you have to overshoot your target. You know what I mean? So like one of the biggest things I saw that we had leverage with was that people, even though like, we created this whole situation with the camp that like ended up on Al Jazeera, like looking like it was the Arab Spring with like tear gas and fighting for the camp and taking it back multiple times and thousands of people fighting the police like all night. So that whole situation was going on, and tactically, like we were never going to keep that camp forever. I don't want to be fatalistic, but we were pushing it to the absolute boundaries of where it will go. And we didn't stop, like somebody mentioned, we didn't just stop at that building, right? We had this botched attempt to take another building around the corner. And then a whole bunch of people were starting squats in other areas at the same time that were like low key, that weren't actually like attracting attention, but was just like a bunch of black people in a house. Um, and so, but those a lot of things, in my opinion, they were possible and they sprung up in that era because you have to go on the offensive. Like you have to clear going on the offensive. The further you push, the more space there is for people to build behind you. And that's a lot of what people don't get. They think I get this thing and then I have to cling to it because it's mine, right? And I can't push too far because then we'll sacrifice what we got. And that always ends up in you losing what you've got. You got to push as far as humanly possible, and it gives more breathing room for people to build stuff behind you. There was a time soon after this, there was a social center established called the Quilombo, and there was a time when they came to like evict that because they hadn't paid rent for a while, and the sheriff who pulled up, and the landlord was there, and all these people were there like ready to throw down with them, and the sheriff came, and some brothers were like kind of lurking around the corner listening to their conversation, and the sheriff very loudly said, uh, are you trying to start fucking Occupy Oakland all over again, to the landlord? And was like, what are you doing? Like, you have us out here with all these people. You want me? You're literally trying to bulldoze a garden that was like just like a vacant lot full of needles, and you want me to clear all these people who are like hostile, and we just got over, like we just are fresh out of Occupy. Like, are you trying to, like, why are you making my job so hard? You know what I mean? And they didn't clear us that day. We ended up clearing ourselves because that's the other problem, right? Is that there is, and this goes back to the thing about what have you been doing for the 5-10 years before. And like, this is the thing that for me never got addressed in like left-wing milieus that I was in, was you you're always gonna run up against a limit if you have a culture where once the enemy is not like in your face trying to get you, that you immediately turn on each other. So that was a big problem with us, was like, yeah, if we would have victory and get a lot of ground gained, but then you lose that leverage because if they just leave you alone, like, I used to joke, and I wasn't so fully joking. I was like, there's a lot of things they could do to us, but like, bro, imagine if they just left us here forever, to deal with our own contradictions. You know what I mean? Like that would be nice in theory, but it's like with where the movement was at and the type of infrastructure we had, it was like you know, people would turn on each other when there was that malaise that kind of settles in when you're not fighting against a common enemy. Um, and interject like long-term movements for like self-governance and alternatives to the state, which is like, you know, how I conceive of what I was fighting for. You know, they're going to necessitate that type of longevity, not only being able to push things super far, but also that in the in-between periods, in the 5 to 10 years between the encampments, that you have to have some type of culture where y'all can like stick together and have some type of comradeship, you know, that doesn't like just cannibalize itself in between, because you can't just like be fighting them every night all night. You know, I did it. You just, people just get tired. Literally, people just get tired, and you start all getting arrested because you're like fighting them on sleep deprivation, and your glasses are broke, and you don't see the cops coming out that alley, and now you got felony charges. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's gonna be downtime, and so leverage is in pushing as far as you can push, what type of real estate you do, and then what you're building behind you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Wendy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to affirm a lot of what Khalil said. You know, what I saw with Occupy Oakland is exactly that. Like there was, so the real estate, like he said, and then the constant radicalization process that was being pushed at Occupy Oakland because of, I think, years, you know, talk about 5-10 years prior, like the years that had gone into organizing around Oscar Grant and all these things. Like people were there was a very big radical element, and it's Oakland and it's the Bay. I mean, you guys saw, like, you know, in San Francisco, all those skaters that were recently arrested. Like there's a lot of subcultures here that are already extremely antagonistic to the police, you know, and like I feel like that organizing and the anarchists and other militants that were part of it were really good at bringing in those, like, all kinds of people. And you know, but yes, so part of the leverage, I think, was them knowing that like people were pushing. They didn't even have to come attack us. Like people were going to push regardless. Like this was just one part of what was happening, you know, outside of Oscar Grant Plaza. Like it was just a meeting place, you know, that was really important for organizing all of those things. But they knew that if they tried to take it, you guys saw what happened. Like, but that was coming from people who were pushing already, you know, and like I said, throughout this though, within the encampment, that we had to fight elements that were not down with those kinds of things. We're still fighting some of those elements. Literally the same people who have been talking lots of trash on militancy since Oscar Grant, they are still here now with their very own org, you know. Like, I mean, that's something that we were fighting the entire time too, before they had their orgs, when they were all these other little orgs that they made where they were just trashing anarchists and militants, and of course making it seem like it was white anarchists. It's the Bay. It's not that, you know, like it's definitely not that. It's the Bay, you know. But so part of why I'm saying that too is because that leverage, the militancy, the radicalism that existed there, that was something that they had to take into consideration, not even just then, but years later when they're like trying to clear out Quilombo, you know, like that is part of what we leverage. Like they knew that there were people willing to fight, and they knew that because they were already fighting elsewhere. Like you weren't just going to get them to stop by like giving them a thing. Like they were going for everything. They wanted everything, you know. And then you see, like, with even the port shut down during the general strike, like one of the things that stood out about that to me is that it was shut down not because like labor shut it down. It was shut down because the people shut it down. You know, like they had no choice. They couldn't do anything. Even if they wanted to not be with it, they had to, because there was so many people blocking the port. But that was like, they knew that was there, and that was always a threat, you know. So I do think that was part of the leverage. So what Khalil is saying about how you have to like push as far as you possibly can so that people can like build behind you, I think that was one of the big like lessons. And also, like, this is just one, you know, like people were coming from Oscar Grant. This was another instantiation. People are constantly looking for that thing that's going to be able to help us leverage whatever power we have, and build it, as and looking for that constantly. And I think that's a threat. That's a threat, and I know it is, because we literally have to deal with the orgs, and the individuals who are fighting from the beginning. I remember my first day of Occupy Oakland, there was this man that was like, we turn and meet the people next to us, and this man was like, my parents were part of the Black Panthers, and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. And then he was like, we have to work with police, and like, I saw this guy, like, in front of the cops, like, while there were, because the entire time that Occupy Oakland was going on, there was constantly demos. Like, people were constantly calling for demos, and they were happening around the city, in addition to like the squads that he's talking about, like all that stuff was happening. And I would see him standing in front of the lines of cops like this, like he was this element that we kind of had to like fight the entire time. And he ended up being with one of these orgs for a while too, became kind of like their muscle. But the entire time we're like pushing, we have to like find ways to outmaneuver these people, to like literally stop them sometimes, but like, I have to say there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that has to happen so that you can basically like push those people, marginalize them as much as possible. Like being in the Bay, I think that we were very lucky, again, because there's just like such a history of radicalism in this place. And there's also, just these subcultures that you're not going to stop. And yeah, but I think part of the leverage that people can try to build is that threat of like the radicalism and the willingness to fight that they know is there, and they don't want to mess with it. It's like, like that guy that goes to Kilembo and is like, we don't want to start Occupy Oakland. Like, it's a pain in their ass. They hate this, because people are going to fight them, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that too with these student encampments too, of like repelling these initial attempts of police to clear the space, or whatever, and like also how they're backing down, and obviously but anyways, we'll get to that piece a little bit more. I want to talk about
one more thing I will say. Anytime there's repression, a lot of people come. And that looks like everyone's excited, and online you'll see people are constantly like, this big concerns will be like optics and numbers, right? And so like repression happens, lots of people come. Numbers aren't always like the best thing, because like, especially coming after repression, like Scott Olson was the night that people retook the camp, the first night, this anti-war vet, Scott Olson, was hit in the head, injured very badly by police. And that like just, it made everything grow very quickly. But the encampment after that was full of people who were basically trying to stop, like trying to bring police in the camp, like who were, trying to fight us. Like, why are no cops allowed here? How are you guys going to be safe? Like it was a lot of people like that. It was a very different crowd after Scott Olson was hit. And I remember thinking specifically like, oh shit, this is what happens, during these moments. Like, you get an influx of numbers, but like a lot of those people are just more people that you're going to have to try to marginalize.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Jason, so leverage in your situation.
Yeah, for sure. I wrote down a bunch of notes while we were talking, but my pen is all messed up, so I'm going to try to read and not get thrown off by my handwriting. But the first one is a little bit funny story. So when we first occupied the building the first day, the student police were pretty much in the building, right, on every floor, monitoring everything, listening to our conversations, and they kind of represented like pretty much the administration being there with us. We didn't really feel like a whole lot of autonomy or even safety, especially spending the night there. So one point of leverage was that they were underpaid and exploited. And so all it took was one 24-hour cycle before they realized that they weren't being paid for their time there, and they left. So that was one point of leverage. Two, the media we definitely used to our advantage. And we had, some experience working with media in the past, and we already knew not to engage with certain types of networks because we're not here to be arguing with people that already have, an agenda or a narrative that goes completely against what we're talking about. And we know like liberal media as well has its own, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, we were able to kind of like use them and use their publicity to keep us safe and to feel like there were eyes on the situation beyond just like an evil type of reckoning of coming down on us. You know what I'm saying? There were people watching and wanting to make sure that we were okay and safe. And so that was really helpful. Also, digital media. Social media is like, you know what I'm saying? This is what we're talking about now with what's happening, on these college campuses today. Social media is critical because when we're able to see live in real time what's happening, you know what I'm saying? It creates a spark. It's like a wildfire type of situation. And we saw that same type of dynamic happen with our movement, where other campuses were picking up on it. Even internationally, there were similar type of actions that followed. And so social media is something that really connects people and keeps people informed and up to date on an instant basis. And so that we use that as leverage as well. Political education. So we have political education not only happening live in the building, but also 3 years prior to that. You know what I'm saying? We were really deeply studying nightly. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, I used to be texting her like, hey, just left political education. It's 3 a.m. Kind of crazy a little bit. You know what I'm saying? But we felt like it was important to be on the same page about our analysis and worldview. And so we carried that with us into our sit-in. And so for folks that weren't previously involved in our political education sessions, they kind of got to get like an introductory course, through the people that we had been facilitating these sessions with. So that was really beautiful. And that was leverage because, the more clarity we had, the more being on the same page about why we were doing what we were doing, the more it kept people together and united and willing to, take that collective action. Joy was another major point of leverage. It wasn't all just about fighting Howard. Really what we were doing was coming from a place of love anyway. So it wasn't even about just being mad all the time. We had a lot of artwork and everything happening, people making music. There was a lot of people doing the things that they felt like they never could do or never had the time to do. And it kind of brought a certain type of element out of people. They felt like they were safe and in an environment that felt like a hug to them. So they felt like they wanted to be there. So that was leverage. Community involvement and support, being really connected with the local community organizations, and then also having the community make donations to us. They pretty much were the whole reason why we were able to stay for so long. We had an abundance of food, and that felt like a really reciprocal type of thing, especially because for years prior, we had been giving food out to the community. So for the community to be giving food to us to sustain our action was really empowering. And in fact, the university kind of tried to subvert that by sending us their own boxes of food. It was the same cafeteria food we were used to eating all the time. We didn't want that. So, we didn't take that from them. Also because we felt like it would kind of flip the narrative. We wanted folks to know, like, no, we're being fully sustained by the people, by our community. So that was leverage as well. I would say having legal support is something that really kept us from just being, you know what I'm saying, a bunch of youngins, you know what I mean? Like having some type of legal team to help us kind of analyze certain things, especially when it came down to negotiations with the board of trustees. Of course, they have their lawyers. They have multiple teams of lawyers that are consulting about how to end the situation. So for us to just kind of go into it without anybody there, that would have been really difficult. So they kind of had to respect us because we had like legal support, not only lawyers, but also, I forget what they're called, but people that are there that are witnessing what's happening at all times. They wear the hats and everything. I forget what they're called.
Legal observers, probably.
Legal observers. So another point of safety, right? That was leverage for us. Also, we had nurses in the building. So people were able to get care if they were sick, if they needed vitamins. We had medical people that were there. Maybe not nurses, because I know that requires all types of certifications. I don't want to, overdo it. But we had medical people, staff in the building that were there to help us. And then lastly, I would say our momentum over time. Again, this wasn't just a spontaneous thing. This was something that we were building up to. And for a while, we felt like, some crazy people that no one was listening to. But over time, we kind of were able to kind of, you know what I'm saying, weasel our way through the student body. And it was the circumstances. It was financial, all types of, monies being misappropriated. That's why we were singing that song. better have my money. You know what I mean? And that's something that really connects with people, because a private institution like Howard, we're paying so much money every year going in debt. You know what I'm saying? We better have something to show for it at the very least. And so, there was a lot happening at the time. Talking about, the negotiations, that was leverage again, because having the legal guidance there to guide us through that, we knew not to accept certain terms, because they definitely tried to play us and make us feel like we didn't really know anything. So at times we were, vulnerable and naive, but having that support there, to check in with, was really important. So, um, lastly, I would just say, having a structure. Like I said, we had programs, there was poetry, there were people that were on a security team. Some people had to be, politely or impolitely removed from the space. You know what I'm saying? Because they were doing too much, making people feel unsafe. And so, just being on the same page. I don't want to make it sound like it was a perfect world, because humans are humans and people are people. And sometimes interpersonal stuff can get really messy and complicated. But overall, I think that was our points of leverage.
Appreciate it. You were also in the administration's building, right? So that was a point
Yeah,
of leverage too.
100%, right? They couldn't go to
Yeah.
work. We were in their offices.
Right on. So I think we've talked a little bit about political clarity and sometimes the lack of it, through this already. So I'm going to actually skip ahead on that one, and we can maybe come back to it a little bit. Well, we can kind of pull this together, right? Because one of the things is security. So I wanted to talk about this for sure. And we've addressed it a little bit, but talk about it a little bit more. And particularly how you deal with, potential co-optation, clout chasing, left-wing celebrities that show up. How did you deal with these things? And I guess related to that, you can think about political clarity, right? Because it's like there is a question of political clarity that comes in when you allow different people to come in and represent the space in certain ways, or attach themselves to it, in certain ways, even though they're not really there. So yeah, I don't know. Let's start with Occupy folks on that, because I'm sure you all had to deal with it quite a bit.
Khalil, why don't you again start?
No, you go first this time.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I mean,
I'm
I don't.
I'm stumped. I got to think about this one for a
Yeah,
minute,
I was gonna say like
because they did a number on us with co-optation out here.
yeah. I mean, definitely, but again, because it's hard. Like Occupy was so big, but there's just been so much organizing over the years, and like after a long enough period, you look back and you're like, what the hell? Like you start to see what was happening. And like I said, we literally were dealing with some of the same people who now have like well-funded organizations that can do a lot more than they could then, but they were working then, and so to see them kind of develop over the years and now have like millions, and making like working 12 hours a week, making $144,000 a year, like you see, like for a long time, we would point at different people, mostly a few, and just be like, that is a problem. And like, but we also were trying to work with what we had here. And there is like, I mean, I don't know if this is true, but my partner will always say like he's been around here for quite a while and has been involved in, organizing since Oster Grant. And he says that, this is a really advanced place in terms of like counterinsurgency and co-optation. And he's been around the country. He's lived in various places, and he's been, a radical for a long time. And he's like, it's the most advanced, in my opinion, because you'll have like the people with the right identity saying the right things, and it's very like it's gotten easier as time has gone on. I feel like people are becoming wiser about liberal anti-oppression politics and things that are, more like DEI than anything. I always want to say, like, when it comes to like thinking about Combahee River Collective, like they're coming out of a very specific context, where they were socialists. They were actually like fighting in a particular fight. It was already anti-capitalist, all of that. And that's very different then when you start seeing that emerge in a lot of these other situations, it's not anti-capitalist, and that's like a big part of it. So like we were dealing with people that were leveraging those politics that weren't anti-capitalist, remain not anti-capitalist, or more about like wanting a piece of the pie, but have the right aesthetics, all of that. And that was happening this entire time, like kind of that story I told you about the man, rest in peace. Honestly, he passed away, but like, and I don't like him. I didn't like him, but still, I still like, that's sad. But that gets at some of what we're dealing with here, where you have somebody that at least brought up like some association with the Black Panther Party, and yet, was like, we have to work with police, so like it's that level of the co-optation could be like that. There was a story that someone brought up online this morning that I vaguely remember, but like in general, I think one time at the time, this like former Maoist, and like veteran of this student movement in the 60s or 70s or whatever, like Jean Kwan, who cleared the encampment ultimately, but she came to the encampment and wanted to speak. And what I remember is that like people were hostile towards politicians. People were hostile towards journalists too, like the vast majority of journalists, like didn't want them in the organizing meetings. I remember being in organizing meetings where journalists were kicked out, and not by like people who I got the impression had been organizing a long time, just regular ass people were like, we don't want to be with any journalists here, and the same thing was with the politicians, all of that. So people booed Jean Kwan when she came up, which was right, because she cleared out the encampment later.
It made her stand in line.
It made her, yeah, that's right. Like trying to cut and be like, but I'm the mayor. I'm going to come and speak at this thing. And people were like, yeah, get out, whereas now, like thinking about one of the orgs that emerged over time with one of the people that was like the most anti-militant, whatever, very different from her and like their group, which would have like the mayor or the DA from Oakland speak at like the anti-cop march and call them a revolutionary, like that's a very different set of people than what we were, in 2011, fighting it. We've done our best. And like, even me talking about this right now is like part of me trying to like continue as much as I can to marginalize this set of politics, and honestly, because I think material conditions continue to worsen, even as these people get more money in their pockets, that's the most compelling case against them, and it's sad that it's going to maybe take a long time for a lot of people to see those kinds of things, but it is the most compelling thing when you see like, oh, actually you killed a lot of things here. Like a lot of things aren't here anymore, and nothing has actually gotten better for like your average person, but you seem to own a house here. You seem to be like renting that house out to people. Oh, and also you're making $144,000 a year, just one of your jobs, working 12 hours a week. Like, that's really interesting. Like that's what I've counted on over the years, because honestly, a lot of me talking this way doesn't get very far, but I keep trying. Khalil, you.
Yeah, I think that I just keep it 100, man, and say I don't think we had the answer to how to deal with that. I think there's some things you can do, to limit it. So the biggest things we did to limit were the having hard no's going in the door. Like Wendy was mentioning, right, that we said no politicians and no police in the camp. That was like, and something shouldn't be subject to democracy. Or they should be subject to a democracy where it's like that is the entering principle, like democracy with whom? Like with people who are upon these agreements in the first place. Like we have democracy in a space with the presupposed principle: there are no cops, there are no politicians. Something I saw with like, the recent April 15th actions in solidarity with Palestine was, in the organizing with that, they just excluded nonprofits entirely, from the organizing. Even though there may be like one or two nonprofits that are cool and would have behaved in a principled manner, but it's like we just carte blanche. We're like, we're not going to do this as a thing where it's organizations, nonprofits repping, right? So maybe that's something to do, is expand it to no police. no politicians, and like you can come as an individual, you can come as a collective, but maybe like, you know, limiting how nonprofits interact. And but that would have to do with like the specificities of your area and the nonprofits you're dealing with and the politics on the ground where you're at. So I don't know about that. But something that definitely limited it was like having hard principles going in the door. But that was the difficulty, man, was like people know how to do the identity game. And those same people who are in Occupy, they got their training and their practice doing it in Occupy, kind of playing the identity politics stuff, playing the, you know, extra black cultural whatever stuff in front of the white people so that they can kind of latch on to the funding and the supplies, right? Because it's like um and that's, I mean, so if you can do something to limit that, because that's one of the biggest dynamics, it's going to be identity politics. But identity politics that's bad, it doesn't work when everybody in the room is black or everybody in the room is brown, because it don't, you just have to stand on the merit of your ideas, right? You come in the middle of the night at 12 a.m. to the camp and start talking about what your organization going to do for this and that. Don't nobody care, bro. Like everyone's black and we're all dealing with the same problems. You being black and yelling about it don't mean anything. Like what ideas do you have to help us address the 2 rapes that almost happened and the Nortes fighting with these drunk Samoans over here? Actual situation actually occurred, right? So having more autonomous spaces where you can force people to have to stand on the merits of their ideas, rather than a lot of times we have these situations where people are able to co-opt by being able to play the identity game in front of people who have white guilt and who will then give them the resources, then they have a leg up on us for the next 10, 15 years. And since then, I mean, with those same people, literally the same people, bro, it's gotten to a point where these people have millions of dollars and they've even co-opted like diversity of tactics. I mean, you have people like literally giving talks talking about diversity of tactics and how they don't object to, you know, they don't like condemn actions, and then they have security in yellow vests putting hands on people in the demonstrations, and you're like, you literally just gave a talk about how you don't do that. So I don't know how to deal to completely stop that level of co-optation. I think it is really advanced in the Bay. I don't know what it's like other places, but like here it's really bad. um, and so yeah, so there's some things you can do to limit it, and maybe one of those things would be expanding that, like having hard nose, limiting how maybe nonprofits or something like that, how they're going to interact with your space, and kind of controlling that strategically based on the politics where you're at. And I don't know what that would look like, you know.
I mean, I'll also say that for me, like I have spent the last 13 years, the vast majority of it, trying to find my people, like and specifically to find other, you know, like, I mean, I'm white to a lot of people, that's fine. But I'm just saying, like, I seek out POC, every, like all the POC I could possibly find that have like a particular set of politics. And I've been looking for them forever and holding on to those relationships wherever I find them, because they matter to me a lot. And because I know that like there's going to be autonomous organizing within like a larger group, and like, you know, there's going to be black autonomous organizing, like feminist autonomous organizing, all that kind of stuff. That's going to happen. But the big group's going to be multiracial, you know, like it's going to be multiracial, and like just like asserting that as much as possible while fighting the opportunists, basically, like the people who would like, and it's, you know, for me, I'm very aware of like all the like Mexican American Chicanismo people that like, you know, would make it seem like Central Americans are like their big problem because they, you know, because there's Mexican hegemony, you know, like I am looking for people that will like both fight them with me and also like fight our big enemy, you know, at the same time. But we need people that are willing to both, how did someone put it, like a model that like recognizes that a multiracial group of people who have actual political solidarity are willing to attack every single kind of person they need to like have our anti-capitalist radical movement.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Sterling and Wiley.
Yeah, I mean, right on to everything that folks just said. I think for us in our particular context, there were parts of it that were a little easier. Like we were working with chronically homeless folks to get housing, right? So there was a lot of people who showed up at the camp with a lot of ideas, who wanted to pull things in a lot of different ways and had a lot of their own vision and all this kind of stuff, but they weren't chronically homeless. And we had like leadership who had been chronically homeless, who that was their community. Like a lot of the people in the camp, like they'd slept in tents together. And Jen was that person. Like she'd aged out of foster care, was on the street for a long time. And then also like the three of us had been fighting the city for a really long time, you know, and that's how we came to know each other, you know. So like we already like knew who these people were that we were fighting. We kind of like knew who we were up against, and like most of the other folks who just showed up like didn't, you know. So we held a lot of like knowledge, and a lot of knowledge about the system that we were trying to like extract a concession from, and what that concession was, and like what the distractions were, you know. Like they tried to co-opt us a lot of different ways with like offers of like, oh, we're going to give you these rapid rehousing vouchers, and like we were like, that's nothing, you know. But we don't, that's not like, we're not gonna be able to walk away from this negotiation with anything less than the actual houses for people to move into, you know. And like we were centering the folks on the ground who were homeless, and like we knew like we were going into these negotiations over and over and over again, but like we knew like that's what it was, like because we'd gone and talked to everybody tent to tent, and we'd held assemblies, and like we just had been working with people for years before that. Like people were saying, you know, we were grounded in this. So in that way, like that stuff was kind of like it was easier to get around the like stuff other people would bring about like, oh no, we need to do this, or like, oh, the camp's not safe, and we're like, yeah, no, it's not. Like, don't, if you need it to be safe, like don't come here because it's not. And like we're not going to try to promise that, or like take a lot of time trying to like enforce your version of what safe is like in this space. Like, yeah, people are living on the street and have been for a long time. Like whatever, it's fucked up, we know. That's why we're here, you know. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that was a lot of how we like got around that stuff. Like I don't know that we were, you know, obviously we were trying to like look out for each other and like intervene in situations and all that kind of stuff. But also it was like, it was too big, the Parkway encampment, to like effectively do that as a small group of people, you know. And there was plenty of people coming around trying to make the space safe that were actually making it less safe. Like this kind of like infantilizing of homeless people, trying to like be like, oh, we're medics, so we're gonna hold your medication, and then like we're not here at night when you need it, and it's like locked up in some tent or something, you know. Like so we did have to like try to intervene and push back on that kind of like activist bureaucracy that like people wanted to run a homeless shelter in the encampment, and like we tried to like push against that as much as we could and encourage homeless folks to do that as well. And I feel like that's how we fought a lot of that stuff. And but like, I mean, I'll let Sterling talk too, but like Jen like would straight go at like pick fights and go after people, and like she swung on people and stuff. Like it was very confrontational, you know. I didn't do as much of the lifting in that department as Jen and Sterling did. You want to get in there, Sterling?
Yeah, I want to be real quick. I mean, the cooptation, those things. I don't know. It just people just didn't have knowledge, and there are things like, I feel like rapid rehousing or some other like offers for support were good examples of like ways that like I know exactly how things work. So I'm like very able to say like, oh, that's nothing. All of this is nothing. Get out of my face with that. And I don't know. It's so interesting because I was thinking about this thing around like I don't even know what theory it's behind, but it's just like I was just thinking about, it was like self-determination. It just felt like we were like people that like have been marginalized in different ways, and then so the demand was just give it to us, and they were like, we'll give you money too, and we're like, no, we don't want your money, we want your land, you know. So like that stuff too is just like was like on it, and people would say things like, well, how about we buy the houses, and I'm like, no, we're not buying shit, give it to me, you know. So there's stuff like that was like that's not a decision, that's not a Democrat. I don't know what to tell you. That's like we're just like, nah, that's like this is the place you come, welcome. You know, and I don't know. I always wanted to build off ramps for people. That's how I handled it. I'm like, well, yeah, this is, you want to do that? Go ahead. You can do that. You want to take that? Go ahead. I work for people. It's like, you want to get into the hotel? I'm not going to say, you want to go to the hotel. We'll open that up for you. But like for the people that were there for the houses, you know, that was the like political, that was the kind of like the General Assembly kind of thing where like people were there, like raise your hand if you're like ready to continue to keep on going, and everybody was keep on going. But like I will say, I worked really hard. I feel like day and night to get people into the dumb bureaucratic shit, because I knew that it was better for them to be out than to be like getting people off on some other side thing. It's like, you want that year, okay, good. Some people are cool with the year or whatever, you know. But a lot of people, I know it kind of sucks, but some people are back on the street, and I figure anyway, it doesn't matter. But I'm just saying, it's better. I think the houses were the better thing.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just feel like, yeah, I mean, again, just like centering when we were in negotiations too, like towards the end, like we just started putting them on the speaker at the encampment and doing it over the phone, and like having the actual homeless folks there sitting around. And like what we just did was we would like bring in the homeless folks into those conversations and not the activists that wanted to be there. And like we got a lot of criticism from the activists for like marginalizing them, like people are talking about. But like it wasn't about them. They weren't the ones like that had to sleep in the tent, you know. Like they didn't have this they didn't have anything to gain or lose in that. So I feel like that was a choice that we made, and we very much did, like, keep it tight. Like a lot of the decision making really, like, you know, we were going around and talking to people and getting feedback and basing everything off of that. But like when it came down to like day to day, like it was a very small circle of like 3 or 4 people that had a lot of trust. And I think that's something I would like put out there, that for folks engaging in this stuff right now, or like maybe about to, or whatever, like there's no one right way to do it, you know. Like do what works for your group and like how to make decisions. Like I've seen a lot of different ways of making decisions. Like they don't all have to be horizontal democracy, like General Assembly, like an Occupy ICE. Like my experience was there were like 7 or 8 different homeless cliques. They each had a little leader, and there was like one person that most of those people defer to most of the time, but not every time. And then there was like an elder or 2 who would like call bullshit on that person sometimes and veto, you know. And that worked for that group of like 50, 60 people. And they made a lot of really strategic decisions and interventions in that campaign that ultimately won the city, like ending its contract with ICE. And I just want to put that out there, like go with like what works for your group and your style and your culture, and like however that makes sense for you, because like stuff is going to come up, and like you'll have to make decisions pretty quickly, and sometimes you won't be able to go back to people and have a whole like long discussion about it. And like people have to be able to trust that you're going to make the best decision you could make in that situation. And like if it was the wrong one, like okay, we'll clean it up later, whatever, we're going to move on, we're not going to dwell on it. And like that's what I'd say about it.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, Jason, you want to share some thoughts on this?
Yeah, for sure. I want to say first, free Palestine, free Haiti, free the land. You know, this conversation is really important. To some extent, I feel almost like out of place, because our demands were not necessarily focused on like an internationalist type of perspective. However, we did have that internationalist lens through political education. And I think that what's happening right now on college campuses is related to a larger anti-war legacy in this country, South Africa, Vietnam. And so, you know, everyone plays a role. And I think, you know, it's really important what they're doing. And I just want to say, like, shout out to them, college students, whoever's involved in this, for doing their part. And, you know, I hope that, you know, even first, I hope for a strong outcome that feels agreeable to everybody. I hope for a free Palestine. And I hope that they'll continue to keep that energy and, invest it into continuing to organize and being strong in that way. In terms of like our internal security for our occupation, which feels a little bit small in that type of scope, yeah, the first day we didn't really have a lot of security protocol. We had an elder. We had a legacy of occupations on our campus. We had one in '89. We had another one in '68. So we had multiple generations of elders who had been involved in the same type of action. So that means we were able to benefit from their wisdom and experience. And so, after a full day or so, we had an elder. I don't want to missay his name, so I'm just going to keep him anonymous for now. But shout out to him. He was part of the '89 takeover, and that was led by people like April Silver. They were strong Black militants on campus fighting for the same things as us. And so they had almost like a real militant, almost like a Nation of Islam type of energy. And so one of the first things that they noticed about our space was you don't have people guarding the doors. You don't have people taking shifts at this door, at that entrance. They kind of made us think about it in a way that we weren't really thinking about all the way. So that was really helpful, especially once we were able to secure the building fully and know that every door was kind of controlled, people taking shifts, and we couldn't necessarily be raided, which was a concern because, that's something that I'm pretty sure has happened in the past. Or I remember hearing stories about like the FBI or something pouring oil down the staircases. So when people were running, when they tried to raid them, they would fall. Crazy stuff, you know what I'm saying? So we were really trying to keep everyone safe and secure. So security, at the end of the day, these are people's kids. So liability, you know what I'm saying? No one wants to be responsible for anyone getting hurt. So we definitely took security really seriously. I think like what someone else mentioned, we had a women and femme floor, which kind of developed on its own, which was another point of safety for people to feel, especially sleeping. It's a vulnerable type of dynamic. Again, not to say that we didn't have any issues, but I think it helped to minimize, which was the best that we could do. Co-optation, there were definitely people that tried to, form little groups, cliques of people that were going to almost like do some type of coup to try to replace, our leadership and take over and do it for their purposes. At the end of the day, it was 9 days, you know what I mean? So I don't know how much time people have to try to do that type of thing when we had been organizing for 3 years prior. So for that type of thing, we couldn't really kick people out for having differing views and opinions because we felt that that would kind of make people almost see us almost like a cult. And that was a concern of ours. You know what I mean? We didn't want to be seen in that type of way. So that was an aspect of it as well. Like I mentioned before, some people definitely had to be kicked out, and we try to do it in the most gentle ways possible. But again, people are vulnerable, and we want to make people feel safe. And so some people were not acting right. And, we had a team of security, AKA students, who felt courageous enough to assume that role, which was not a gendered position whatsoever. You know what I mean? Who were able to handle and navigate those situations on an interpersonal level without any type of authority figures or, police or anything like that. So that was really empowering to witness. And then like what I think others have mentioned was community agreements. You know what I'm saying? If we didn't have agreements in terms of what we were willing to tolerate and not tolerate, it would have been crazy. And it probably would have been, I don't even know. It probably wouldn't have lasted more than 48 hours. I know that in order for something like that to last for almost 10 days, we had to have some type of structure, which I think everyone here has all been reiterating in different ways. And then also, again, having adults, elders there, checking in on us at various times was really important because as young people, again, students, we kind of feel a little vulnerable. We're going up against these major institutions and establishments with a lot of money and interest at stake. You know what I'm saying? And so having elders, alumni, people who'd experienced that type of struggle before, constantly checking in on us. Again, all points of security. So the co-optation, yeah, it was stuff happening. It was people trying to do things, but our sense of clarity and being organized is kind of what limited that from being something that completely stopped our motion. But again, like others have reiterated, in these types of environments, you do have to be a little bit strict, because if you're not, then people kind of, you know what I'm saying, get carried away in the moment. They feel the heat of the moment and start, you know what I'm saying, wilding. And so I don't, out of the 900 or 800 people that participated, maybe only 2 or 3 people had to be excused out. So overall, I think that we did a pretty good job with security. And I know that, you know, the students that are, you know, protesting right now are having similar conversations around, you know, how they can stay safe, because it's scary too. Like being outside, for us, we were inside. I think a lot of these encampments are outside in the elements, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of things to consider. And there's a lot of really, I don't want to keep saying the word crazy, but there's a lot of crazy people in this world. And so ultimately, you know, security and making sure that our campaigns and our movements have some type of way to protect itself, I think is really important. So I love hearing about all the different ways that you all have been able to, you know, establish that in your previous campaigns, and that's pretty much how we did it.
Appreciate that. I think I want to kind of start to bring us to a close, because I know that we've been going for a couple hours and I know it's getting late on the East Coast. But I think what I'll kind of throw together there is like a a combined kind of, well, what I'll do is I'll throw out 3 things, all right? And y'all can pick which one of them or multiple that you wanna kind of reply to, and we'll kinda do it as a kinda closing, other lessons that you wanted to share or impart, right? But the things that I was thinking about were either, one, like negotiations, right? If this was an important aspect of it, and thoughts on best ways to to approach negotiations. Some of that folks have already said, so don't feel like a need to be redundant if you have. Um, Another point that we didn't get to that I kind of wanted to discuss is like aftermath, right? So what happens after you agree to something, or if you didn't have demands, then obviously you didn't, but the aftermath of it, and thoughts that you have on that when you're no longer occupying the space, right? And yeah, the last question was just general lesson. So you can pick one of those. So talk about negotiations, talk about the aftermath of negotiate or the aftermath of the encampment. With aftermath, I'm also thinking about the difficulty of, if you agree to something, how do you maintain accountability around that, right? And then other lessons that you all want to share. So yeah. Um, Wendy, why don't you start us off?
Sorry, I don't know what I just did. Yeah, I guess I would focus on aftermath, kind of like Khalil has been talking about. We didn't have demands outside of the encampment itself, and I think that sustaining those relationships, trying to create infrastructure that keeps like at least a lot of them together, is a very big challenge. And like I said, the problems that existed outside of the camp never stopped existing inside the camp. We went back to like the same kinds of disparities, and like injustices that some people felt worse than others. Like very material things that we couldn't just like opt out of. And so that really does make it very challenging. And honestly, I feel like I've spent most of my life trying to like deal with this very thing, because I love not everyone, but I love a lot of the people that I met, and that like afterwards continue to be a really important part of my life too. But that takes work, and I have a job that's demanding, and like it's been really, really difficult. But trying to sustain relationships beyond this is a big challenge. But also I will say that like we did like a lot of what, like I said, coming out of Oscar Grant, that's a big part of Occupy Oakland. Trayvon Martin demos, big part of Oscar Grant, or big part of that was Oscar Grant and Occupy Oakland. Part of the Mike Brown, we called it the Glorious Winter. Like that era was coming out of those things too. Like we never stopped We never stopped, you know, and we never stopped, you know. So the aftermath is that we never stopped. Like it might be harder, you know, we might be struggling sometimes, but we never stopped.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Khalil, you want to add on to that at all?
Yeah, I would say similarly, you know, it might maybe, you know, may or may not be applicable to other encampments and situations, you know, where it's more about demands and trying to follow up on those demands. But for us, from our situation, I think, um, yeah, I mean, maintaining those relationships because it's about the 5 to 10 years in between, and making a solid intention coming out of whatever you're doing, whether it's about demands or it's about autonomy or whatever it's about. That in that fight, when the next big thing happens, like it's not right to be in the same situation, making the same mistakes with the same problems. You know what I mean? It should be like new problems. Like when I came into organizing, I was 18 years old. Like I didn't know anything, didn't know anybody. A lot of people I worked with were like hella not trustworthy. A lot of the, you know, things I did, I would do super differently in retrospect, right? You know, but then, you know, later, like when I, you know, when my little brothers went into organizing, I was like, you know, these are like the 4 people you can trust because I know about 300 organizers in the Bay Area. There's this one anarchist dude. There's this one Afro pessimist. There's Wendy Trevino. There's like one other person. All right, so work with them, you know. So it was like they were going in like a lot more sophisticated and a lot more intelligently than I was. Um, and a lot of that for me was because, and this is something to consider, like, do you really want to invest those years in between in some type of activist or academic milieu? Sometimes you do, because maybe sometimes that something can really come from that. Or like in my case, the biggest realization I had was like that was not where I should be investing my time, and I needed to invest my time like back in my own community, like in the. So I've like totally left any type of like left wing what I call like subcultural organizing, whether we admit it to that or not. And you know, I almost exclusively like organize just in the predominantly African American Muslim community, like right here. You know what I mean? And engaging my brothers and my sisters and my cousins and my immediate community and like book clubs and like talking to them about my experiences and introducing them to my friends and you know doing stuff like in the community that wasn't hella exciting or sexy or whatever and it wasn't but it was like that has made this very different. The situation when the George Floyd uprisings jumped off, and then like my younger siblings were participating in that, and I had to sit back because like I couldn't do anything for various legal and other reasons. You know, there was like when I was coming in, there was like you know, I was well, I won't get too into the weeds, but basically, it was a very different situation, and a lot of the youngsters in my community who are engaging now, aren't facing a lot of the same problems I was facing. They have like a lot more support. They have like they're much more intelligent and sophisticated in the way they engage because they have all of this like experience, not from me, but from me and numerous other people who kind of like inform them, and they're not limited to any activist or academic type network. This is like something where the political education has been happening in the mosque. It's been happening in the home for, you know, a decade prior, ever since Occupy. So, you know, so really being strategic about like it might be hard to like go to your back to your church or like go back to your community or whatever that is for you, back to your family and deal with people and like have hard conversations and like build in your community. But sometimes like that's really the thing that needs to happen in the aftermath, you know, and don't let people because a lot of stuff is going to end up with people just fighting each other, and that was the biggest thing that just, you know, they didn't disperse our movement. A lot of stuff like we broke it up by us fighting and us not having enough infrastructure and not doing some of the harder community work. So focusing on community work and building for the next thing.
That's beautiful. Thank you, man. Yeah, Jason, why don't you talk about it? Yours was kind of interesting, right? Because it's like you come to a set of agreements with your administration. On paper, you basically get all your demands met, but then there's also the reality of the aftermath of that as well. So I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, 100%. So, you know, we definitely, you know, we had negotiations. Like I said, we had a lawyer there. We did our best to, you know, advocate to keep the pressure on. Um, this was my first experience in anything like that before. I work in the labor movement now, so negotiations and bargaining is something that's more familiar and common. So it's really interesting that I got my first shot at that, you know, as a student activist. But negotiations are power talks. You know what I'm saying? You can have certain conversations through negotiations that you can't have at a normal type of sit down, at least in our experience. And so we found that, for the most part, the board was trying to negotiate in good faith at the very least. And so we were able to kind of, you know what I'm saying, go back and forth. The one thing that we didn't win was the resignation of our student body president. Um, but the reason why we felt like that was okay is because we talked with our fellow comrades. We talked with everybody, and we asked ourselves, is this something that's going to keep us here for 21, 30, 40 days? And ultimately people decided that we felt like we had won enough of what we wanted, and also that it wasn't even about what we want. You know what I'm saying? It was more about what we did, and the feeling and the sentiment that we all hold and held within ourselves, and how we'll be able to use it moving forward, to be able to continue to fight. It was really practice. You know what I'm saying? It was like a playground for us to be able to kind of just figure out how we can do something. And so, not to say that we didn't take it seriously, but yeah, some demands were won, some were lost. I can't even tell you the state of where most of them are at. I do know that after the fact, Howard went into a Howard Forward campaign for about 4 years, which was like a whole institutional campaign to try to get its services and inner inner workings up to date, up to code, because that was our big fight, is that things were just really not up to date, up to code. How are you going to be in finals week? You don't have a printer. The computer lab doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? It's water dripping on you from the top of it. All types of stuff. You know what I mean? So I would say that the aftermath, it was a spark. We were continuing a legacy. There's been another A building occupation even since then. You know what I'm saying? I, they might have had even more students, even more support. So overall, I try not to think of it in terms of, oh, well, in 2024, this demand is not currently being, implemented. Yes, of course, but it's also difficult on a student campus. It's not like through policy, through legislation or whatever. It's kind of like semester at a time. You know what I'm saying? So I think that we did what we had to do for our class, our group of students, and I encourage future classes to continue to push the needle forward, and learn from the lessons of past experiences. And so another thing I have to mention is that the aftermath for a lot of people, we didn't jump straight back into like hardcore organizing. A lot of people had kind of reached a pinnacle point of feeling burnt out, tired, maybe even depressed, especially given the fact that we were such a high profile situation. A lot of us, I mean, I remember walking to Target with one of my colleagues at the time, comrades, and someone being like, "Hey, I remember seeing you guys on the news." It was a lot for us, you know what I'm saying? And so, being students and managing our classes, some people didn't graduate, you know what I'm saying? Some people had challenges, and so I just like to be realistic about it and not sugarcoat things and make it seem like it was just this la la land of a fantasy, and then we did this, and then it just suddenly ended. Like, these types of actions and decisions require a level of commitment and a personal type of, like end game in terms of what you're willing to do and get out of it. So yeah.
I appreciate that. And I think the point you made was kind of the point that I was hoping you would make too, thinking about like some of the challenges of campus organizing, which is that once like you said, your class did its role, right? And like it's a constant fight, right? It's a constant struggle. And even if you get these demands, then in some ways it becomes incumbent upon the following classes of students to then actually hold the administration's, feet to the fire, because they're the ones now that are students that have leverage. And I just say that because of all the stuff that's going on campuses now. Like, a group could say they're going to have investment transparency, or they're going to divest from this or whatever. Like, okay, that's going to be a long-term struggle to make sure that they maintain that type of commitment. And I just want folks to be ready for that and understand that. And not to say, I think it's important right now that people are fighting to fight for whatever that you can get for, but just everybody to understand that it is not, these things can be agreed to, and then rolled back or let go or channeled in a slightly different direction or whatever. And unless there's pressure on these folks, a lot of times they're not going to follow through on everything. They're going to let go of what they can. So yeah, Wiley and Sterling.
Yeah, I like, again, everything everyone said so far, it's like really rings with me. Like, yeah, I was gonna say, like, it's never over. Like it does keep going. I think with us, like, we were in a lot of negotiations with the city government, the housing authority, various subdivisions of the city and that kind of stuff. We did come to a negotiated settlement that looked like us having to clear the encampment in a time period to like get this on paper promise of a bunch of houses. And to do that, we took a bunch of their houses and occupied them with people from the encampment. And that sort of kept a lot of pressure on those folks to like deliver the houses, because we had people in them. And it's like, it didn't stop, just because the encampment was gone. But like, yeah, I would say like a lot of work that got done to keep them accountable was done really upfront by Jen. Like she found like a lot of divisions between those different agencies and exploited them. She was really masterful at that. And I think that's like maybe worth people thinking about in this moment. Like, your opponents can't like seek out the divisions that might be there and try to heighten them or split people off or get them to fight each other if you can. And I don't really know what that looks like, but I imagine there's a lot of creative minds out there that might be able to pick up on something. And I guess, like we also like, we're still here. We didn't go away. We're still organizing. We've done other campaigns. And we still like have these occupied houses that are like getting transferred, and we're organizing with all those people and doing a lot of political education and building with them. And like Khalil, I really appreciated what you were saying. I feel that too. Like, I don't really feel like I'm organizing within like a less milieu. Like I'm working with people who are like being fucked over by the system, and we're like trying to build something together, and I've found that to be a lot more grounding and real than a lot of the theoretical stuff that people can often like come with or whatever. And I think maybe in this moment, like there's something that too. Like, I mean, these encampments, they might be short-lived. It's the end of the semester or whatever, but it's like very clearly grounded in like trying to fight and counter this genocide that's happening. And like, it's really clear where the leadership is and like what the moral compass is. And there's no like kind of compromising around that, So I don't know, like don't feel like if you lose the camp, like you've lost, like we kind of felt that way too, like with the homeless people. Like, you can evict the encampment, but like we don't have anywhere to go, So like just be that way, Just if they take away the camp, like you have all kinds of options to escalate in a different way, and come back or take a building or whatever, So yeah, I don't know. Sterling, what do you got to say?
Yeah, I started to think about what is this thing that we're doing, like I don't know. I guess that I have the feeling of like maybe it's like theoretically within like the Marinage kind of like space or and that's what I've been driven by. And I don't know. I'm kind of bad because I just believe in kind of like magic or things happening just the way they do, just because we're on Russell Maroon's shows, like the field where the person is the I don't know, I guess Von Colm was the person that's the reason that he's in jail. So it's like this officer, this park ranger, and it just seemed like Marinage was like just like made sense for us to like not have any nonprofits, not have any police, any DHS or CPS people either, and just it just made sense to me, and it still makes sense to me. But also the whole point of, I guess, among the Marinage space is just like you never have anything. Like they're always like gonna attempt to like take what you have away. So the whole point is to always be in the mode of that, of like going after them. And I don't know, I'm always interested in this like thing where sometimes, just to speak plainly, sometimes white people, they like get tired of fighting, but like, I don't know what to tell you, but like, I felt like every single day of my life, had to fight to live. So it's not really a thing. You know, it's like every single time they like, I don't know, I've lived in the world. It's like, it feels like they're trying to kill me. And I'm like, and I like refuse to do it. I want to continue to live, you know. I was thinking about like my parents or my mom or my grandma. It's like, yeah, of course they're like ready for them to die. And you have to like tell them, no, sorry, nah, she wanted to live. I don't care what condition she's in. You know, she said, always keep her alive, you know, shit like that. So, and that goes for like every day that we talk to the housing authority, because we have to go to a meeting to them today, and I got to go to a meeting at City Hall. You know, I got to do those things, and I'm just like, I'll do that, but you know, I'm gonna say what I'm gonna say. I don't really care. I was kind of called out yesterday. You know, our comrade Chris Rogers, he was just at the abolition school. He's like, well, at least there's some self-knowledge around like being annoying and being persistent. I'm like, yeah, I'm annoying. I don't give a fuck. Like it's our lives. So if it means that I got to call you at 10 o'clock at night because I need to know if this came through or not, I'm going to call them. You know, I'm going to keep doing it. And that's what it takes. I'm sorry. You know, sometimes people hate that, but like, that's what it takes. I'm going to make sure that you actually come through for the people, and that like all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted or whatever. And then they actually do feel safe so they can go about the rest of their lives. You know, and you know, I think a few people in Philly are building like all types of kind of like similar like spaces of like self-governance. So we respect that, you know, like the Peace Park, or you know, Ubuntu Freedom, like some of our friends. And I just think about the way that the Sister Iglesias Garden, you know, people have taken land, and there are so we kind of like have these like allies across the city that we're working on like building this like I guess like these archipelagos of like self-governed thing. That's like the imagination thing. But like we're here for, I don't know, we're here for you know, Wiley's old as fuck. I'm gonna be here. You know, we're gonna like, I don't know. This is just gonna be how it is. You know, and this, you know, we're not going anywhere. So that's the thing. And it's not you know, so I don't know, when we talk about like what are the outcomes, is like, it's like, yeah, because they know that we're here and we're going to keep going. And I show up with, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't know, I'm not really that big, and I'm kind of a nerd, but like I still just show up with a little pad and I just say the thing I'm going to say, and then you walk out, and that's it. But I could tell you, we signed some, we're about to close on some houses. We got other houses, and make sure that people that we know are safe in them, and that we try our best and be in relationship with them about it. But like, you know, it's like that thing where it's like, we don't do it. You don't do it alone. You can't do it alone. You had to have people that are like driving that with you. That's what I just like grateful for all of them every day. It's like we're starting this thing, Moms on Monday. It's like, well, I'm not starting this thing. The people in our thing are like, nah, we need to make sure that moms that go to the family court know that they have rights, fight back on that thing. And that's just the thing that started by them, that we're just like, you know what, I'm going to support that. And that means like, that's another front that we got to open then. And I don't know, sometimes you get tired of it, but for that, I have energy, honestly, because that feels great. That feels real good to be like a bunch of us that care about this thing, yelling at them, telling them that we're not going to, and they're going to be held accountable for what they do, for the dirty shit that they do behind the court, but in these courts, right? And also talk to people, do political, you know, I guess it's called political education, but like, we just like, the thing is like, we talk to people, it's like, yeah, is the justice ever done in that? Tell me the justice that's done there, you know? No, we'll get it out here. We'll get it by taking care of each other and making sure that they don't see us. And if we can build some structures, some safe space, when we stay safe space, we're like safe from state repression, you know? So it's like, if any partner that's out there that wants to be up there on building that with us, you know, we're down, you know. And I think that's what it is. It's like continuing to be. And I will say, love out to you in San Francisco. I feel like I got some people saying, "Oh, come out to San Francisco," but it sounds like a hellhole. It sounds hard, you know. Oakland, that shit sounds hard. You know, at least we got some people. It's like if we're gonna be at the police station, you know, on there, and it's like you just had a bunch of, you know, at least people in the neighborhood, they hate the police station too. So they're just dapping you when you're like yelling at it, you know. It's like when we're in the neighborhood, it just feels really good. It feels like, oh yeah, this is the place we're supposed to be, yelling at these fucking killer cops, right? And the whole neighborhood got your back. So, you know, it's like peace out to all the people in North Philly and West Philly that know what's up, you know. So you know, my family's from here, so this feels a little bit of, I know that's not it's still in land, but like I feel like we got a little bit of a stake in making sure that this is safe, because my family always felt that this was the place to come. So, you know, love out there love to DC, love out to Oakland, all the fights that are happening, and to all the college campuses. It's just like, you know, we see you. I don't know, the young, you know, the young people out there. I'm like, I see you. I love it. Keep going.
Yeah. If anybody else, we'll close out. But if anybody else wants to say any, you know, final words to just people that are, I mean, I've been, you know, it's amazing to watch so many college. I mean, like every day look on social media, and it's like you can't even keep track of how many encampments are popping up all over the place. And you know, I just shout out to all the students, but also knowing that within all those spaces, like there's a lot of people that are also just showing up and defending those things or supporting those things, or saying, you know, Oakland Abolition and Solidarity put out a statement after not a statement, but just uh, a tweet, you know, just say like, hey, if you start one in the Bay Area, just know our crew has your back, and a bunch of other crews have your back as well, right? And I just think that like energy is going on all over the country, and obviously it's an egregious time, you know. I mean, to be facing you know, down empire that is just continuing to dump, you know, tens of billions of dollars constantly into a genocide, and you know, to be gaslit by your administrators and the politicians and the media all at once. And you know, really, it's interesting talking about co-optation in this moment, because obviously there are mechanisms of co-optation that people are calling out and we can see them, but also it's a difficult, you know, I think it was Abdul Jawad who said this on Monday, it's a very difficult struggle to co-opt, because empire does not want to, they don't want a ceasefire, they don't want to stop the genocide, they certainly don't want a free Palestine, right? And the students have a very clear understanding of like, you know, no, you're funding settlements, you're funding you know, the military, you're funding Zionism. Like there's so many things that students can say and like have a list of demands, and it's a material impact from their institution, right, to all these things. And so anyways, that's just been kind of amazing to watch. But I think I'll close it out unless anybody wants to just say, you know, a last word.
Free Palestine.
Free Palestine, right?
Free Palestine. That was exactly. Yeah.
Free land.
Free Mumia.
Free Mumia. Yeah.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Mumia. Yeah, absolutely. May the next one be on the other side of the walls. So, all right. Free Palestine, everybody. I'm going to take us out of here.